As you read through the devotional Jesus is Better, you'll see a lot of reflection and examples from Scripture of the things that God has done in the life of the Hebrew people in the Old Testament and the things promised to us and taught to us by Jesus and by his apostles in the New Testament. And the whole point of this video series is to give you some of these tips and help and liturgies for your life, which means the order of what you do with your life that help you not just read this book and read this book with your teenager and nothing really settles. I want to see God work through the text here. And so one of the things that you can do to support the good reading of the book and the reading of the book blessing your teenager is a very simple habit that I learned years ago from a guy that was mentoring me and changed a lot of the tone and the timbre of my own family, is we often recount God's faithfulness to our family. So what I mean by that is I have brothers and sisters who have Ebenezer stones, which is a thing from the Old Testament where the people of God would mark where God met them, usually with an altar, and it would become a kind of a meeting place. And as you would travel through the land of Israel, you would see these different altars, and people would remember, at this point, God did this for our father Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, right? They would remember the things that God has done. And so I have a lot of people in my life who I've encouraged in this, and they've started to just do a simple practice, like they take a small stone and they get a Sharpie and they write on it, "New job 2013," and they put it in a jar. And it's incredible to see how that jar grows, the amount of stones in that through the years. That's a powerful testimony to help your teenager understand that they're still a part of God's story. That the book itself, the Old Testament and the New Testament, continue on, that God is still working among his people, that there are still stories being woven and told in the people of God. And so it's one thing to just say that, but it's another thing to help them understand that your family, that I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're a believer and you're trying to help and pray for this teenager that you care about, that's a work of God. That's a miraculous thing that God has grafted, as Paul says in the New Testament, he's grafted you into God's eternal family. So we need to remember God's faithfulness to us in our everyday life. If your parents or your grandparents were believers as well, you need to share that with that teenager and tell them stories about the lineage of faith that they have and how God has blessed people through that lineage. I think about my grandfather who started Happy Hill Farm and the man of faith that he was and all the things he did in response, just in humble submission to God's will for his life. My oldest son was 4 when he passed away. And so my younger kids, I have kids younger than that, they never met him, but I want them to know about what God did through him and how he responded to the very same commands that I want them to respond to and that I need to respond to. I want them to know that the same Spirit that in the Old Testament energized Samson to tear a lion in half is the same Spirit that caused Christ to walk out of the grave, is the same Spirit that dwelt in their grandfather through grace and can dwell in them through faith. Like, that's my appeal to them, is they need to join into the story of God. And so to make that compelling, we need to remember God's faithfulness. If we don't keep up with it, we won't remember it. If we don't journal it, we won't remember it. If we don't create Ebenezer stones, we're not going to remember it. Because in reality, my youngest son truly believes, he's just 5, and he really thinks that the house that we're in, Jesus gave to us. And I'm okay with that. Obviously, he doesn't get the mechanics of loans and mortgages and banks and jobs and all of that. But we were just celebratory that Christ has yet again provided for our family. And if that's what he gets out of it, then I see my role as a father as success, at least in that one small thing. That he believes that everything good we have has come from his Father in heaven who loves him. And so that's why we recount the new job. That's why we remember the new house. That's why we remember when we were really sick and we were healed from that illness. That's why we remember when we visited that doctor and that doctor had the right diagnosis and got us on the right track. That's why we do these things, because we live in a fathered world. It's not a world of chaos and happenstance. It's a world where God sovereignly gives every good thing to the children who he's called and predestined and loved. And if you're a part of that story, we need to share that with those teenagers that need to hear it. So recount God's faithfulness to your family.